To catch David and Ashley a bit up to speed, I'd like for you to sort of spend a little time on the problem that we're trying to solve. Because now we're going to begin sort of thinking about the solutions. And the problem we're trying to solve is samsara. But I'd like to try and hear from you what you think the problem that we're trying to solve is. How would you put it in your words? What is Hinduism accomplishing with the gods, the goddesses, the one, a lot of the theory that we were talking about? We've been talking about karma, we've been talking about lots of things. What's the problem? Because solutions don't make much sense if we don't get the problem on the table.
Maya. Illusion.
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 Thank you. And what is the illusion then?
Well, the illusion can be anything, but the illusion causes suffering. So the illusion is basically not truth. So you go through life and you learn all these untruths, and these untruths that lead you into actions which create suffering, and that's kind of what happened. And so Hinduism tries to remove that illusion.
Illusion, excellent. What else are we not seeing well?
I think like most of the religions are kind of just searching for a purpose, just trying to find a simplified format to create meaning in our lives.
What is our purpose? What's the point of being here? Excellent. In the downtimes of Albertsons, I try and have meaningful conversations with those that are in the store. Usually it's subject checkers that might be there. There was a gal last night, and she was sadly remembering that she was having her 8th anniversary as a single woman. And she didn't quite know how to deal with it in a lot of ways. She has had a horrible year, to put it mildly. And she was there's just sort of a level of frustration for her, because she was reattending religious services, trying to sort of come to grip with those, and she was sort of dealing with the American way of doing religious services, and so many of them were so similar. She was struggling because she was single, and she was still struggling with the singleness of life. She was struggling because her family was not here. I was so fascinated that the conversation I had with her is, do you think the solution that you're looking for might be inside of you? Everything she was talking about was exterior to her. And I was struck by my conversation, because I teach it, but I don't know how my practice of it is going, and I think it's a bit light on my side. But I was fascinated that was one of the suggestions I had. Do you think possibly all of your exterior lookings might benefit from an interior look? But then we have to ask the question, well, how do we do that? How do we look within ourselves? And so it was one of my conversations, and I trust she won't be irritated at me for using it tonight. But it was just, are we looking in the wrong place, would be my sense of the problem. Our religious traditions have been very exterior. Something out there is the solution to all the questions I'm asking. And I was so struck that I've got a new arrow in my quiver, that I can use in my conversations. It's completely accessible to people. Is it inside of you? Is what you would like to find inside? That was the answer by Socrates. That was the answer of the great philosophers. That's where you should go. You should go inside. Now we're discovering what Hinduism is going to try and accomplish is turn you back inside to look inside of yourself. But that problem is part of the problem, looking in the wrong spot, to answer, or to add to my question to them. Anything else? What's the problem we're trying to solve? Or what's a problem you're having that you're seeing some daylight into? It could be another way of organizing our thought tonight.
I think part of what's just kind of coming to my mind is that we get to a point, you know, sometimes I think I like to have a big t-shirt that just says "Born to Suffer," you know, because that's kind of what my whole life in the last, since I was 45, oh, probably earlier than that, has been. It's been a one kind of suffering after another, one suffering after another, one suffering. And what I'm realizing now is that I have stopped asking why. I'm not saying, why am I suffering? Why is it me that has to suffer? And what's the purpose of my suffering? I'm not asking that right now. I'm getting through it by saying, in the middle of all of this, regardless of my suffering, who am I? And what am I trying to accomplish in spite of my suffering? And I don't know if it's even what am I trying to accomplish, but just, well, it is to a point. Is in spite of it. To not be focused on why is this happening to me. You know? It just is. And then when you get to that point where you just say, well, it just is. You know? And we can't walk some days, okay. What are we going to do with that today? You know, I don't say, or what did I do in my previous life, or what did I do to deserve this? Mm-hmm. I don't ask why.
Well, that's a problem, I think I would argue, is the number one problem for Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, for the religions of India. It's dealing with suffering and pain. That makes talking about these religions in America really difficult. Mm-hmm. Because I don't know how many people have Lynette's perspective. Life is just suffering and pain. But would you say that's your life? My life is a life of suffering and pain. If you had to vote, would that be your number one category? Or is it something else? That's not my issue. My life is not suffering and pain. I couldn't say that.
Yeah, I think it depends for me. Like, I don't know, stuff is tough and it's just the way it is, but at the same time, like, then I can kind of remember to, like, be grateful for what I do have, you know, like, that changes my perspective.
You don't want to be remembered as the person that suffered their whole life. What I work hard at is that I cut that off with my online videos. I announced it one time, and then I kind of took it off, and I want to be more than that. I am an artist, and musician, and mother, and daughter, and wife, and I am who I am, in spite of that. And so, if there were a point where I had to say, well, what do I want to be remembered for? I really don't want to be remembered for being, you know, that old woman. I just don't. I work hard at being jubilant and having a positive attitude and, you know, keeping things up. Because that's really who I am. You know, it just happens to be that I have a huge amount of suffering, physical suffering.
I'd like to say something. I'd like to split pain and suffering apart, whereas pain is something you don't have any control over, but suffering is always self-imposed. So suffering, you can always get rid of suffering, and that's where these religious traditions can help us, because, you know, you may be in pain, but you have the choice of whether to suffer from it.
You make everybody else suffer. The same thing true is true.
My grandfather, when he got close to the end of his life, was in an amazing amount of pain. He had leukemia, and it didn't seem to get him down. He was smiling and pleasant to be around, and I couldn't understand that, because whenever I'm in pain, I am not a pleasant person to be around, because I don't like it. You know? And so, but you know, there's something there. I think people can learn that.
Yeah. That's good.
Because the majority of people that come to the religions of India don't come with suffering and pain. The religions of India are different in the American context than they are within the Indian and in many of the Eastern religious contexts. So just sort of it's a challenge to try and understand this, because for most students, when they come to it, they don't come with this premise: my life is filled with suffering and pain, I'd like to solve it, therefore I'd like to know more about the religions of India. They come with different hopes and expectations as they come to these religions. And so they have to move into another area. If they move into ignorance, another area that clearly they're trying to solve, the religions of India are trying to solve the issue of ignorance. You will also, as you study religions, discover that that's a dominating concern for all religions. You just don't know something. Let me tell you what you don't know. And so that becomes an intriguing element of each of the religions as well. And I think Americans are much more comfortable with that there's a sponge quality. There's a reservoir of knowledge that they're unaware of, that there's something they can draw. They can be a good student in the religions of India because they know so little about it. And so it isn't quite as existential as I don't know who I am. I don't think it's quite that deep. It's that I don't know much about about this topic, and I'd like to know more about it, as opposed to I don't know who I am. And so I think even that, as an answer for ignorance, challenges the is a challenge in the American context, because I think many come with a lot more confidence of who they are. It isn't that they have this absence of knowledge in that topic. So ignorance is even different in the American context than it is in the Indian context. Illusion, which Brett brought out for us. The illusion that we have is also a very odd problem for us, because our entire context teaches us to be attracted to things, to grab things, to want things, to be a consumer. And so that is an American context. And we don't see that as a problem. We just see that as I don't have enough resources to get the stuff that I want. That's the American problem so often. I can't get the resources. I don't have the resources, therefore I can't achieve many of the goals. And so that illusion is a challenge, because the religions of India are going to try and break you from that particular part of your life. To be a consumer is the opposite of what the objective of the religions of India are trying to achieve. And so that becomes a challenge that we're working on. And so this element of desire is a positive. And so we're going to have to almost invert that to try and make the solutions that the religions of India are offering a reasonable solution. And so how many Americans, when they come to the religions of India, want to be broken from their desires? And so this is a real challenge for these religions, is what are we trying to accomplish from understanding and knowing these religions. Another one, the cycle of the cycles of life. That you're in this perpetual cyclical downward spiral that is a necessary way or an important way of understanding the Indian context that they're in. That life that I was in previous lives, I brought what I know into this life, and I'm probably going to have a difficult life, and it's going to be a challenge. So the religions of India are purposely designed to solve that problem as well. But number one, if you don't think in the sense of reincarnation, if you think in a linear, I have a one life to live and I better do the best job I can, then the problem that it's going to try and solve may be the wrong problem. Do you see how there's such an extraordinary challenge for Americans working in religions of India, because they come with such a different set of awareness, of context, of background, so that the religion is trying to solve problems that I'm not sure are a problem. Does that make sense? And so it ends up that yoga becomes a very physical, enjoyable, structural part of your life that doesn't have the spiritual doesn't have the spiritual hooks. It doesn't have the spiritual depth. It doesn't have those elements that it clearly solves for those in an Indian context. Simply because I'm not sure that we have all the problems that it tries to deal with. Anything else on the problem that we're trying to solve? Every religion tries to give a path of transformation. So the question you have to ask is, what's the path of Hinduism? But before I even answer that, I want to ask the question, do you want to be transformed?
I think we're transforming every day whether or not we want to have that happen.
Okay.
But
So it would be nice to have a little more control over the transformation that you're clearly going through?
yeah, maybe. That's
Okay.
what we need.
Okay. So there's a perceptual recommendation. We are transforming. Why is my question a problem within the American context? We're now going to give you these paths of transformation. Do I need one?
Yeah, not everybody is that open to change or being transformed, you know, these radical ideas.
Okay.
So yeah.
The older we get, the harder it is.
Age is going to be part of it.
Stillness.
Yeah. A kid is going to be wanting to transform into the beauty that a child can turn into. Teenagers, middle adults, senior adult. At each level, the transformative process may be less meaningful. Okay. Have you lived in a positive psychology in your life or a negative psychology? You are a great, wonderful person. Everything you do is wonderful. You are amazing. Just keep on being who you are. Would that be the dominant psychology that most of us have grown up in? So what's the point of a path of transformation with that kind of positive psychology?
Yeah, if you're good with where you're at, why change?
Yeah, our psychologists have worked hard over the last 50 years to give you a positive psychological perception of yourself. And I think they've succeeded. If you were to go 50 years before that, then you're in a negative psychological, usually spiritually motivated context where you're terrible and you need to be saved. But the last 50 years, that kind of logic doesn't make much sense anymore. You're a terrible person, you're evil, and you need to be saved. Everybody looks around and says, from what? I'm a good person, I know that. What are you trying to save me from? So the religious context really struggles in the positive psychology that we exist in. I think you're comfortable that if you went to India, you wouldn't find that positive psychology. It would be a different form of psychology. It wouldn't be as enlightening as... Is that a fair point of speculation that most of you could agree with? So you're also going to have to deal with that, okay? So the paths of transformation are asked the question for what? I think Kate is opening the door to say, I think we need to rethink that every day of our lives has a transformative purpose. It's going to take us somewhere, positive or negative, and we better get a little control out of it. And the religious traditions have been those levers of control into transformation. So I think you're giving us a pathway. So I don't mean to have this whole evening sort of settling into, so what are we all here for? I really don't. But I do want you to, if you can, find that place where you do sense that the religious journey can carry you somewhere, and possibly to a much better place. And by being aware of the different religions, you're getting different tools in your quiver as to where you can go and be changed into. Fair enough? So Hinduism offers us 3 paths of transformation, and there's many more, but let's settle in on the 3. I was having a lot of fun this week looking at that illustration that I chose, which I thought, isn't that a nice illustration of transformation? Which path will I go on? Might it be the first path to the left, the first path to the right, the second path to the right, or just sort of wandering along on this journey and ending up wherever I am? Wasn't that a nice symbol that I discovered? Om. And I was forced to go back and look at the Hindu symbol and wonder if that same symbol has that meaning. Just a moment of thought. If I were to say that sailboat is the point of your religious journey. Your journey is complete the moment you touch that sailboat. Okay? Go and touch it. There it is, folks. That's the point of your entire religious existence. Please stand up. Please stand up. All of you. Okay? And go and touch the sailboat. It was easy, wasn't it?
Which one's real?
Oh, good for you.
There's a diagram over there.
Now, a Hindu would want you to realize something about what just happened. You all had a goal. You all achieved the goal. But what was that? What's that moment of reality about what just happened that a Hindu would want you to sense? The question that would point you in that direction is, did you all achieve the goal the same way?
No.
Did anybody achieve the goal in virtually, if not exactly, the same way? No. In any religious tradition, do you achieve the goal the same way, even if people have the same goal? No. Hinduism wants you to appreciate, first of all, that any way to the goal is fine. Any way. So it isn't just 3 pathways, it's any pathway you want to be on. The tragedy is there are many religious traditions that define the pathway so narrowly that it seems like there's only one pathway and I've got to find it and I've got to walk on it. And I've got to stay on it. If I fall off the pathway, I'm in deep trouble. I've got to find my way back in that pathway so I can get back in the pathway so I can get to the goal. That's really narrow, really hard, really filled with guilt. And really not very human in a lot of ways. Hinduism starts with the premise. Any way you want to get to, do it. It's your way. And I expect you to have a unique way to get there. So they start with that really sense of tolerance and inclusion when it comes to the religious traditions. Now, knowing what you know already about India, why is that a really wise way for them to do it?
There's so much diversity.
Yeah, we discovered how many gods somebody decided to put a name on. Anybody remember?
Well, may I correct my earlier statement?
Okay.
I said 300,000. It's actually 300 million.
300
No,
million.
really?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because our author gave us what number?
3,000.
3,339. With 33, I'm sure, I think that was my memory, named gods, which you are wonderfully happy to depart from.
Well, if you go to any source, see, the 300 million, I may have remembered it wrong, but
Right.
but I watched a lecture on the Gita the other day, and it was a Western guy, but that's what he said was 300 million. So
Yeah. So it doesn't matter. And it really doesn't matter what the number is. The point is tremendous diversity of religious life, tremendous personal gods. Again, how many people are there in India would be where I would take this. Anybody know? Are we past 1 billion yet in India for a number of people in India?
Give or take.
Yeah, we're pretty close to that somehow. And so yeah, everybody's got their own way of doing it. Is pretty well the end of the story. So there's 3 dominating paths I want to open up to you. There's the path of liberating knowledge, there's the path of action, and there's the path of devotion. The path of liberating knowledge is a path that's different than we might think. I had a gentleman come in my office yesterday and just wanted to sort of mosey around my library. That's all he wanted to do was just sort of see the library. For him, he finds extraordinary knowledge in the books of the library. I sense he'd worked through the local public library and he'd heard that the college here has a library and he just wanted to go wander around. So knowledge for many of us within our context often means books I've read, knowledge I've acquired from professors, which is the first step often to a book. But that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about intellectual knowing. We're not talking about it that way. So the pathway we're talking about is deep experiential realization of the ultimate ground of one's true self. Knowledge to be felt and experienced. Did they just close all the religious seminaries in India? You get a sense that religious learning in America is arriving in a seminary and learning everything and all the books you can take, and you take that knowledge and deliver it back into the next generation of people who want to know it, and you keep this intellectual knowledge going within many religious traditions that dominate in America. This is different. How would you even interpret that statement? Deep experiential realization of the ultimate ground of one true self.
It's wisdom versus learned knowledge. Things that you know through direct experience instead of through stories or through, you know, somebody just telling you that that's the way it is. You know it's that way because you've experienced it firsthand.
Excellent. It's the experiences of life. What's yoga do? What's yoga do that influences this? Why could the path of liberating knowledge include yoga?
Gets you more in touch with yourself.
It's purposefully pointing you to get in touch with yourself, isn't it? It's just a mechanism of doing this. Knowledge to be felt and experienced. So that experiential knowledge. And as you go through religious traditions, you can see where people emphasize. And in the various religious traditions, you can emphasize the intellectual knowledge. You can emphasize the communal knowledge of being in community and that community side. Or you can emphasize the experiential. Indian religions are going to emphasize the experiential. And so you're not going to go to a library to find your knowledge. You're going to the forest. The forest is where you're going to find what you hope you think you need. It's the forest is where you need to go. And in my readings this week, it was so fascinating. They're going to go there because they assume that whatever they're going to learn is too dangerous for everyone around them. So they leave their communities and they go into the forest. That's why they become forest dwellers. And so many of the ascetics through the millennia have gone into the forest. Well, why would you do that? You're going to learn something so powerful. You can't be around other people. Was that intriguing rationale that I discovered this week. I know true Brahman when there is nothing for me to desire for myself, for I already am all. We tend to come into this world with the perception that we have a blank slate. When you have a child, do you have the perception that the child is a blank slate? You tend to have that perception when you start nurturing children. It's a blank slate. You're working with them. You're adding things. You're giving them experiences. You're starting with little and giving them much. Woo! Is that ever different? For I already am all. The premise of Socrates, as well as Hindus, was you have everything within you. And the task of those around you is to find it. And eventually for you to find it yourself. So the point of your mentors is to start stripping away all of those things that are binding you so that you can't find your true self. They're just giving you experiences so that you can strip those things away. Because what you really have is already inside of you. Interesting. True Brahman, again, the confusion. How many Brahmins have you already seen over the last few nights? If you want to name them all, take your word list and look at all the Brahmanan, Brahmanin, Brahmanun. Hinduism will drive you nuts with all the names and that type of thing. So, your knowledge, this kind of knowledge, experiential knowledge, destroys desire, thus karma, the negative effects of karma. So the assumption is this knowledge will allow you to control those things that you're encountering that you might want. That reduces the amount of negative karma that you're generating around you, and you're now moving on a path of transformation. Okay. So moksha is the dissolving of the Atman into one Brahman. Salt and water. Bliss, freedom, joy. I've been trying to get bromide or something into my water at home. I'm trying to get my hot tub to work. Can't get the sucker to work. I got too much in. I got not enough in. I'm going crazy trying to make the mix just right of what salt is in water, of my bromides. But moksha, what they're searching for, the goal is the dissolving of, where's Atman? What did we discover last week? Where's Atman?
Self, is it when?
That's your true self. Where do we see that? That's what one's true self. That's Atman in Hinduism. Okay, that's Atman right there. So it's dissolving of your Atman, your true self, into the one Brahman. The one, from our reading of the creation story last week. So you're allowing your oneness to dissolve into the immensity of the oneness. And that's where you're finding bliss, freedom, and joy. Sound like something you want to do for a path of transformation? Folks, this is where yoga has been profound. This is what yoga was the key tool in developing. It gave the capacity to withdraw from the world as a detached hermit. And then do something, which was nothing. So you've moved away from the world, you've moved into the forests, because what you're discovering is too powerful. And you're assuming the most comfortable pose you can assume for long-term meditation. And adjusting the postures simply for creativity of postures and creativity of what you're exploring. But meditation and yoga is intrinsic to the path of liberating knowledge. It's to realize that true Atman and reach moksha. The chariot is bodily life, the charioteer as the soul. Where's this metaphor coming from? She's faster.
I'm reading it. So.
Are you reading it
Yeah.
now? Okay, so the Bhagavad Gita is, and who's the charioteer? Krishna is the charioteer. And what's the chariot? What's that metaphor that runs through the Bhagavad Gita? What's the chariot then?
It is a chariot.
In body?
Or, yeah, well, it represents your body.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a carriage on the horse's war. War chariot.
And the word chariot. So this metaphor runs all through Hinduism, is that of the chariot and the charioteer.
If you go north into China, it's often the horse and the rider.
Hmm.
So rather than the chariot, it's a horse
Mm-hmm.
and the rider.
That was the dominant mechanism of warfare for them, was the horse and rider as opposed. But there was,
Well,
there
Yeah,
were chariots as well.
and the chariots made a big deal, even in the Egyptians, when the first Egyptian king was able to make war with chariots, he really wiped out his enemies.
Very much. So soul and Atman, are you sensing where this term is interconnected? Soul is Atman, that inner capacity, that inner part of you. The chariot, the bodily life, that which can be left behind. You don't need it. But it has that sense of the body and the soul. So there's our dualism. So meditation, withdraw one's consciousness from the outer sensual reality and turn within. fourth stage process. The sacred sound we've already learned. Ah, the waking state. Ooh, the dreaming state. The deep sleep state. Ow. 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 And the mantra, that universal sound, is proclaimed. But the question is, where's the Atma in that sound? And what I'm doing, where's the Atma? Ow. 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 Where's the Atma?
It's still inside of you.
Okay. It's got to be inside of you. That's the whole premise of this.
It's whatever's causing the sound.
It's sublimated, isn't it?
Okay. Sublimation.
You're vocalizing.
It's not
The vocalizing itself, is that the Atma?
the sound.
Like the inner vibration you're feeling?
Inner vibration, very much a part of that sound. Want to try it? Just to... Ow. Feel those vibrations. Ow. 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 I really enjoyed what we did last week. That was fun. Where's the Atma? Again, I'm going to say something that a different school will have a different answer, but that's okay. I'm still going to say it. Where's the Atma?
You like the source of the sound and the person hearing the sound?
Source, hearing,
The person creating the sound, but also your
creative voice.
You're also hearing and feeling it.
How could you detach from your own sound? The silence is the art. In between sounds is what one school's argument is. I can't get it any. So that silence, the emptiness of the mantra, is that moment of most importance. The silence is an intriguing place to speculate on. Now, you don't even own that. The value isn't in the sound. The value is in the non-sound. But you have to do the sound to get to the non-sound. There's no silence unless there's vocalization. So you can just have all sorts of fun with this thing. But the entire goal is silence. Interesting goal. There's another religious tradition that venerates silence. Can you think of who that is? They venerate silence. A key part of their religious tradition.
Catholic monks.
Okay, some of our Catholic communities are dedicated to silence. They will never speak again. They will be in silent prayer for the rest of their spiritual lives, physical lives. Yes, there are silent monks. Any other religious tradition where silence has become such an extraordinary focus? Judaism. Jews are trained that as a minority culture, the best the best weapon they have in their toolkit when they are being oppressed by majority culture is silence. Go into the chaos of suffering and do it in silence. It's an intriguingly and strong part of Judaism. And the horror of that is silence carries you where sometimes? Into Auschwitz. And they went silent. And the rest of the world went, why didn't you fight? Why didn't you, do anything but seemingly walk into the gas chambers? Silence is an extraordinarily powerful tool. The Jewish tradition has always done it. Silence is here in Hinduism as a very powerful tool. That's the real Atman. Neither cognitive nor non-cognitive, unthinkable. That's the Atman. What's interesting from my reading was the steps of yoga, and I'd love to know if any of you that are deep within the yoga have had an opportunity of seeing it from this perspective. And again, the sourcing that I'm working on has 8 stages to yoga. Does the number 8, does that play a role in any of your yoga training that you've been a part of? Do you use 8 stages? Is that a comfortable number?
8 limbs.
8 limbs, okay. Okay, so 8 limbs, so I'm okay so far, just on some of your traditions. So it's, for me, it's trying to identify that. And now the defined 8 limbs. And the question is, how does yoga get us to moksha? Okay, so how does yoga accomplish this goal that's intrinsic to the religions of India? How does it solve that? So the first is restraint. That first stage is to abstain from violence and greed. You can't do that very well if you're in a yoga position, right? Can't fight very well, can't want your neighbor's stuff if you're in a yoga position. Is that intuitive? The position itself gives you that first step of restraint. Observance, purity and dedication. Posturing, proper sitting position. Breath control, drawing closer to the essence of reality. Have you ever made that jump when you're doing your breath control? Have you made that assumption that that's what you're doing? When you're controlling your breathing, and all yoga would do this, vast majority, been around all yoga, but fair to say, yoga is breath control. It almost goes hand in glove with yoga is breath control. Do you make that assumption that you're now drawing closer to the essence of reality?
I mean, in my yoga teacher training, that wasn't something that we necessarily said, like, oh yes, like this is what's going to happen when you do breath control. But I mean, I think that does happen.
Okay.
I think it's not untrue.
Okay.
But not necessarily what they would teach. Or what
It would take them down a pathway that would be a difficult one to work with. Would
and,
be,
you know, I don't know, the essence of reality is just a really big thing to accomplish there. You know, it's like
Maybe the essence of your reality.
yeah. So breath control is pranayama in Sanskrit, and so that means, or so prana is like your life force energy, and yama is control, and so you're controlling that life energy. So I guess, yeah.
okay?
What they do most often, I've seen, is they start with you controlling your breath, but then they want you to release it and let it go on its own. but they want you to still observe it. And it's a very difficult thing to do at first, to observe your breath without changing it. And so there's a place inside your mind where the automatic stuff is happening versus controlling stuff.
Mhm.
And there's this space right in the middle that they want to get you into. And that's what they do a lot.
Fifth stage, withdrawal of senses. Withdrawal of senses. To detach the mind from that which is going to give you problems, your sensory apparatus. And yet the first stage is often to sense your senses. Know where your feet are, know where your muscles are, know where your positions are. Become very, very aware of them. But to then withdraw from them, to move to somewhere else. Concentration, focus the mind. Meditation, stabilize the mind. And 8, to move into a trance. The mind swells to limitless reality. How often is that a goal? Is that an objective that you've ever attempted within your yoga or yoga training or yoga experience?
That's the experience that took the Satguru into his life, what he does. He sat down one day and he had that happen to him. And to him it only lasted, like 15 minutes, but it was a couple of hours. And when he came out of it, he was like basically turned on. And then, so he just goes around and talks about religious stuff to people. That was the one experience that changed his life.
When we look at Buddha's experience, is that not what's happening to the Buddha? Is that 8th step, which we'll talk about in a couple of weeks.
It's not something that you want to do all the time.
Ramakrishna wouldn't teach people how to do it because he was afraid that that's what they would do, is they would do it like a drug, And so he would never teach people how to get there. He might take them into that place, but he wouldn't show them how to do it themselves.
I mean, I think that's the ultimate goal, but when I practice, that's not like, oh, I want to become enlightened, like right now as I'm sitting here, like, there's a ways for that to happen.
Down the road
I think,
somewhere.
that's
Yes.
it's a process.
Yes, down the road somewhere.
Seems like if you live in that way all the time, it makes it very difficult to function in everyday society. Because people expect you to have an opinion, people expect you to feel strongly one way or the other, and if you move to a place that's kind of beyond that, people don't understand you, or want to trust you with making decisions, in jobs or things like that.
In our society, it's different in India. They love people who are like that. They revere them. They
encourage
follow
them
them around.
Yeah. But in our society, this kind of a goal would be problematic. And in some cultures, they attempt to mimic the trance with hallucinogenics. Hallucinogenics become their tool of moving into the trance phase, and gives them that sense that they can control now the trance. The path of liberating knowledge, and so with that, you've achieved ultimate transformation, you've achieved moksha, and there is no more rebirths.
So, does Hinduism believe in a literal form of reincarnation? Is that, and it's a non-desirable aspect of their religion? I mean, they perceive it as more of a negative because it leads to more suffering and pain?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Buddhism has moved off of that literal form of reincarnation. We will be talking about that in the Buddhism section. But Hinduism has the premise of continuous rebirths and negative results with each rebirth. That's the underlying psychology of the Hindu context.
So rebirth is perceived as a form of and maybe I misunderstood you. So they view rebirth and reincarnation more as devolution versus an evolution to a higher state.
Yes.
You actually devolve.
You're devolving.
You're devolving. So the ultimate goal is is to achieve moksha. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Moksha, which means no more rebirth.
That's right.
It's like graduating high school and you don't have to take the class over again.
You're finally.
But ultimately, it feels to, you know, I apologize, I've missed some of the other lectures.
Yeah, take care of others.
That's the good part.
Right. And if you get to a point where you can experience contentment without having to like eat a meal or drink, you know,
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
just be in this.
Yeah, I agree. I think all that is great because it ties into harmony and balance. Or attraction from our base instincts is, we all know, is very healthy sometimes. And we don't get enough of that in Western culture. We're, in particular right now in this hyper-materialist society that we live in, where we live in excess all the time, constant excess. So to attract from that periodically is super healthy. So I appreciate that aspect of harmonization and balance there. But this ultimate transformation aspect is a little bit interesting to me. It seems to almost refute some of the some other aspects of this path or religion, if you will, that we've created here. It's very interesting.
No, I'm gonna jump in here and, some of you guys know I'm a little bit of a strange person. The trance part, you know, mind swells to limitless reality, that has happened to me without drugs, okay, a few times. And what I have experienced is that it's not for selfish purposes. In my own understanding, it's an understanding that I gain, that I share with other people that can accept it, can accept my vision, so to speak, as an encouragement of what is to come that's beyond who we are right now. And that it's something that it's really, really hard to explain. But if you don't, it can't be for selfish purposes, for, okay, I'm in this for my self-transformation. The whole point of going through this number 8 trance, I don't even know how you would, it is for the purpose of benefiting other people. It's not for, it should never be for your own personal gratification. Okay, ever. That may not be Hindu. I don't know if that's Hindu. I have no clue if that's Hindu. But whenever this has happened to me, it was for the purpose of somebody else's education. Okay, somebody, you know, David and I talked about this today, about understanding that in my own perspective, during a point of trance, I have an understanding that there is an afterlife. Okay? And it's extremely real. The realization is like limitless, and that's the limitless reality that I have experienced within a trance type setting. It makes people look at you like, oh my gosh, a shiver, an artist from Eugene, you know. But it isn't. It's a weird. It's very hard to explain. But when you can, you know, when you get an opportunity to experience that, you have a different perspective, and it cannot be just for your own self-gratification. It can't. And you are not. It just can't.
So Lynette has opened a door for you that achieving a trance may be a positive experience. I dare say that might be a horribly fearful goal for
I'm
you.
not anti-trans, I don't want anybody to...
But there's a doorway she's just opened to say, wow, what would that be like to actually experience a trance? And this would be a non-hallucinogenically induced trance. Our shamans throughout the history of humanity have sought the trance state. Most of the shamans were epileptics, and so they had a natural capacity of moving into the trance just with their own brain construction. Hippocrates called epilepsy the sacred disease because of this. They were revered in their cultures because they had the capacity of going into the trance. And if the trance has a social benefit to it, now people appreciate the trance. If the trance is merely an individual self-assessment, then you might as well go in the forest to accomplish it. But it really is meant, and you're going to see here how Hinduism has constructed the point of the forest into the life of people, and I'll deal with that in a second. But I want you to sort of allow Lynette's comment to sort of open the door to that positive possibility that this goal of trance might be a useful goal, and yoga can get you there. Okay. Do it with guidance. Do it with those around you that maybe serve as mentors for you. But it's there. So I'm also going to sort of challenge the word balance. The most disliked word in my moral vocabulary is the word balance. Not because it's not important, but my frustration is it's often assumed to be the stopping place of our moral life. That somehow we get just enough of this and just enough of that, that it becomes the moral good place in the way we develop our lives.
Where you can stagnate or stop moving.
And my frustration is stagnation. Yeah. Balance for so many people means I can stop and I can stagnate. My encouragement is that you take a zealous approach to life. That you do things zealously until you are out of balance. And you must zealously go the other way in your life until you're out of balance in that direction. I'm now teaching Aristotle, folks. This is what Aristotle taught. And that you then turn and you move in the other direction. And you'll discover as you live life that your overzealousness narrows to what they can then define as perfection. Life becomes that mature overzealousness of competing goals through life. Aristotle's favorite one was courage. How do you make a soldier courageous? We could use a nurse. How do you make a nurse a courageous individual, ready to go into battle and offer themselves to difficult situations? You can pick either metaphor, that of an illustration of a soldier or a nurse. But you do it by coming out of life, out of your training, and moving into these situations, whether it's in a battle, you just charge the lines and you go after it. As a nurse, you go running into these infections and you try and deal with situations as best as you can. And after you've been in the battle for a little while, you have a moment of reflection and you go, wow, that was scary. I went too far. And the next time you encounter a similar situation, what you then discover is you're reticent and you underperform the next time you engage in a difficult battle. And you don't go. You're cowardly in the way you approach it. You stand behind the barriers the next time because You now remember what it's like to be too far. And as you come out of that experience, you go, wow, I was a coward in that. I didn't engage it. I should have engaged the problem. And you go hard at it again, but you don't go as far as you did when you just got out of school. And now life is this balance. So balance means this, I'm all with you. But for me, balance causes us to not act zealously in directions that would be highly beneficial for us.
I concur completely, and I'm using the Greek interpretation of that as well. I mean, the implication to harmony and balance is that there is no such thing as perfection, actually. You never achieve absolute perfection. You're always oscillating between these extremes. And
But in Aristotle's language, that is perfection.
okay.
And our psychological we've been having this conversation right from day one, is what is perfection? And can we even talk about it in our modern culture without falling into the trap of divinity? If divinity equals perfection, then none of us are perfect, because none of us are gods. So I cannot do something to the point of divine because I'm not a divinity. But if perfection means I'm doing what I'm designed to do as a human being, which is Aristotle's definition, and I can do it well. And he always had that extra term. I do something well, I'm doing what I was designed to do. You are doing something perfectly from a Greek perspective. And we've lost that. We've only assumed that I have to be a god to make the word perfect work.
Well,
And sadly, that word doesn't work in that setting.
Yeah, the stamp of monotheism, turned everything upside down.
It did.
Put it through a different prism.
Okay, so the path of liberating knowledge. It was yoga, folks. It was yoga. It wasn't go to the library. It's go to the guru and learn your yoga. And so for our yoga adherents, that's a moment of pause, please. The entire pathway is structured around yoga. That's how important yoga is to the Indian culture. It gives them an entire spiritual pathway of looking inside to what is most important to them, discovering it, and then, when properly utilized, transforming the world around them because of what they discovered. That's a meaningful, powerful spiritual pathway that you want to enjoy. So this is the pathway of liberating knowledge. The second pathway is the pathway of action. For most, they are a long way off from spiritual perfection, and the trance is really that what you're achieving. That's the perfectionism here within this spiritual journey, is the trance. And so most folks know that life is different than that. They're not going to be able to do it. They're going to be in a caste that won't allow them to do it. They can't go off in the forest. They've got to go to work tomorrow. And so those realities of life is the same in their lives as it is in our lives. And so they need help. They need someone to come alongside of them and give them assistance. They need to work towards a lessening of desire. And isn't that good? Because if they can lessen their desire, that's a whole lot less expensive than encouraging desire. True? And who's got enough money for anything in life? So if you can lower your desire, you're lowering your resource demand in your life, and you're increasing your capacity to say, what I've got is just fine, thank you very much. I don't have a desire for my neighbor's whatever. I'm just happy with what I got. And that contentedness comes from that rupturing of desire. And so that makes more sense for most people. The hot karma action from desire is bad karma. The cool karma action done without desire, that's good karma. They can do this for many lifetimes. So the key to the path of action is do what is expected in your dharma, your caste, your place. Do it, and do it well. There's your perfection. And if you can do it well, you have accomplished it. There's an amazing story of how the priest could help in this journey. And many of us have an appreciation of spiritual mentors that we come alongside, pastor, priest, guru, whoever you want to decide as, the point is, how can they help me in my spiritual journey? Well, Hinduism has an intriguing way of helping in some cases. True story, about to read it, happened Thursday, June 14th, 2001. Kathmandu. Nepal's Crown Prince, Dipendra, massacred his entire family, including his parents, the king and queen. In a drunken rage, an official investigating panel said on Thursday. In a report released on Thursday night, it said it was certain Dipendra carried out the June 1st shootings, and then he fatally shot himself afterwards. A drunken, quote, a drunken crown prince indiscriminately fired, killing the royals, Taratha Ranabath, the Speaker of the Lower House, and one of the two-man commission, told a news conference broadcast live in Nepali state TV and radio. He gunned down his father, King Birendra, and 8 other members of the royal family. Until now, the official explanation for the killings had been an accident. But few in the Himalayan mountain kingdom's 22 million people had not already heard through the grapevine that Dipendra was guilty of the crime. Riots followed new King Gayendra's coronation as confused and angry Nepalese grieved for leading members of their royal family, but officials said that things had since calmed down. The situation is not serious, one said. The concerned ministry will look after security measures if necessary. The Nepali newspaper Radhanhi, citing unnamed commission sources, said the panel had questioned over 150 people, including survivors and ballistic experts, and over 99% had pointedly said Dipendra was responsible. As an anxious population waited for news of the report, traditionalists bade an ancient Hindu farewell to Dipendra that they hope will banish the ill fortune that had struck the palace. Dipendra, as crown prince, was named king as he lay dying in a coma from an apparently self-inflicted gunshot wound. As a monarch who died tragically, traditional Hindus believed he too should have a Kato ceremony performed on his behalf, as did his murdered father on Monday. On Thursday, a Brahmin priest deliberately defiled himself to assume Dipendra's woes. The priest, a vegetarian all his life, ate a meal laced with animal marrow before dressing as Dipendra and crossing the Bagmati River on elephant back. At first, the elephant appeared reluctant to go. As Nepali dignitaries slapped its buttocks as to send the bad luck on its way, the elephant turned tail and chased them up a narrow path. Once brought under control by the mahouts, it lumbered across the river, this time to a fusillade of stones and rotting fruit thrown by the now vengeful onlookers. The priest will be banished for the rest of his life, supported in exile by gifts and money donated by the well-wishers, anxious to rid the capital of the bad luck that had plunged the nation into crisis.
This happened in 2001?
2001.
Wow.
A different world, huh?
Isn't that a different world? How does the priest help? What do you... There's some extraordinarily religious universal principles woven into that story.
Kind of like taking other people's suffering onto themselves.
Mm-hmm. Someone who had been what, did what, and now was what.
Someone who was holy, like defiled themselves, and then went away.
Yeah.
I mean,
For the good
for the good of everyone.
of the entire community.
Sacrifice. Sacrifice
Yeah.
yourself, man.
Here's the sacrificial system working.
Yeah.
Yeah. Normally you take a perfect animal in your sacrificial system that doesn't deserve to be killed. You take that perfect animal, you kill it, and the point of that is to absolve you of the sins that you have committed in your life, and you're now free to now go on your life without the guilt of those sins, because the animal has absorbed those sins. It has cleansed you of your sin. And so many traditions, the ancient traditions, this was always the New Year's Eve celebration was a celebration to absolve you of all your sins, because January 1st was the new year, and you could be clean on the first day of the new year. You sense the psychology happening here? Okay? Which is many of the ancient religions, including Judaism, does this. That's how they clean themselves of what's happened in the previous year. If you're cyclical and you have a mechanism of eradicating your sin, the sacrifice, then you have the chance to be brand new again on day one. Okay? And so there's an underlying ancient religious psychology operating here that is strikingly different from many other religious traditions. So if you were struggling, could you do something like this? If horrible things were happening in your life, could you do something like this? Would there be anyone you could go to accomplish anything like this? Or did you have to suck it up? What's the closest thing you might have? Sarah had the problem of walking into whose office? And almost being invited to tell her deepest secret. The psychiatrist. Why does the psychiatrist have professional privilege so that anything you say can never be used against you? Same purpose, folks. So you can have a sense of freedom, because at least somebody knows what your issues are. The priest. So now think the value of the priest in confession and absolution in the process of the Orthodox or Catholic priests. Same principle here, folks.
And the same principle is the whole entire principle of Christianity, with the sacrifice of Christ in place of the sacrifice of the animals, the absolution of sins of all people.
So Christianity is built on that principle.
Very simple.
That Jesus gave the sacrifice, therefore you don't have to live in your Jewish sacrificial system that necessitated somebody taking your sins away. Okay?
Which is an echo of the Abraham story where he was told to sacrifice his son, and then after that, they didn't have to sacrifice humans anymore.
Right. Hallelujah.
So the point of the path of action is that we may need help in the journey. We might need somebody that'll come alongside and say, hey, I'll bear some of this burden with you. And so Hinduism has this wonderful capacity of doing that and helping you with the psychological burden of bad karma. Okay? So, path of action. The third path is a path of devotion. And this is, how can the God save us? I can't do my duty well. I'm trapped in the devolution of life. Bad things are happening all the time. People are dying around me. We're all getting sick. My children aren't doing what I want them to do. They're marrying into the wrong caste. They're doing da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Life is hard. So the three great gods we've already talked about, these are personal and present. They love and worship them. That helps them to liberation. Unify with the great God who is also in the inner soul of one's heart. One rises above the bondage of karma and finds joy and peace in the power of the beloved one. Okay? And so that's the path of devotion. That's what most middle-class folks in India can do. They build a shrine. It has their deity that helps them remember. And remember, all these pictures have all these moral messages. Remember our conversation on Garusha and all the moral messages of each one of these elements in that picture has a moral message. Listen more, cut unhealthy attachments, think big, concentrate, remove your obstacles, talk less. Every one of these little elements of that icon is teaching you moral lessons that you should think about during the day. Every hand, every symbol, every element to it is reminding you, and that becomes the path of devotion. Okay? Comments on primary elements of Hindu ways of meaning?
So with action, it sounds like you pretty much were identifying like sacrifice as being the main form of Hindu action, but what about service or good works or doing doing extra service to somehow
Yes,
connect with
woven
God?
into the path of action. Woven into the path of action. Very much.
But sacrifice for them is not nearly so preeminent as it is in Christianity. For example, in Christianity, its primary locus is the sacrifice of Christ. Whereas this feels like just sort of one aspect of the path of devotion.
Now, sacrifice is going to be ongoing within Hinduism and daily. There is an expectation within the path of devotion of daily sacrifice. The question is what gets sacrificed and what's the mechanism of it. And so for that we need to spend just a smidgen of time into how do you live your life as a Hindu so that you get a sense of the daily opportunities you have for doing one of these paths.